Hello and welcome to the Sci-AI podcast. This is episode number 26. Today, my guest is Somesh Mohapatra, an IIT-Roorkee alumni. Currently, he is pursuing his MBA and PhD from MIT. He is also an entrepreneur and has founded MatSci, AI, an AI services company for manufacturing industries. Thank you, Somesh, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Vivek, for inviting me and hosting me here.
Thank you. Well, so amazing. Let's get started. So my first question to you, Somesh, is, and you've done quite a bit of work in this as well. So what is NeurIPS, and what was your research paper presented at NeurIPS? Something about vaccine design using machine learning of human digrons. What is human digrons, and why is it such an interesting thing?
Okay. Oh, yeah. So NeurIPS. NeurIPS, or Neural Information Processing Systems. It's one of the largest machine learning conferences, other than the two other conferences referred to as ICLR, or International Conference on Learning Representations, and ICML, International Conference on Machine Learning. So as a part of our group and as a part of the lab, we have been hitting 3 NeurIPS workshops in a row. Like the first one was 2019, hitting with cell-penetrating peptides, 2020 with peptidomimetic binders, and now 2021, 2 papers receiving the top honors in the conference, essentially contributed talks where we went ahead and presented live to the conference attendees there. One of the papers, as you mentioned, was vaccine design using machine learning of human digrons. It's a fantastic work because of the ingenuity of the experimental collaborator that we had, Nicholas Truex, here in the Department of Chemistry at MIT. And what it does is we need to roll back a bit to understand the entire vaccine design process. So what happens when we have cancer? And this paper was mostly on cancer vaccines. In cancer, there are mutations that occur in the gene or the human genome. And then in those mutations, once you do a genomic sequencing, you identify that, okay, these are the distinct mutations in that particular patient's genome. Taking those mutations, people try to develop immunotherapy or ways by which they inject, let's say, peptides or like gene tools into the human body, such that the body can develop a natural immune response to it. And whenever it finds this edited genome in cancer cells, it can go and kill the cells. However, the body's immune system is very powerful. And the moment you give something like a mutated like gene or a protein into the human body, it just realizes it quickly and degrades that. So the body does not want to learn from that process. The body says, oh, this is a foreign material. Even though it is existing as a cancer cell, the body just does not want to learn when it is injected into it, and the body rejects that. So the ways that we developed here was to bypass that human system, or to bypass and actually leverage the human proteasomal degradation system that we have, and give body unique pieces in the peptide system, in the peptides and the digrons, which are essentially the motifs at the end of these peptides that are injected into the human body, to make the natural immune system learn and be aware of these mutated sequences, such that whenever it finds something like that in the cancer cells, it goes and kills. Think of it as an analogy of looking at several different pox viruses to tackle smallpox, and ultimately landing on cowpox and saying that, oh, so if cowpox is used, then the body learns what smallpox is. So it is about finding that very special thing. And the clear advantage here is, again, doing it for a personalized medicine approach or a precision medicine for a specific patient. So it's like creating a drug for a very specific mutation for a very specific patient. And just the sheer amount of machine learning and the ingenuity that was involved in it was creating vaccines, leveraging the body's own immune system, and treating cancer like that. Just that
Wow.
impact was just amazing.
Fantastic. Right. So do you think because of this, in the future, detection of cure for cancer will expedite or will have so much acceleration in the scientific community that eventually AI is helping it. So do you think that'll progress because of this research?
Absolutely. I have a very strong belief that works like
Hmm.
this are going to help in increasing the adoption of AI and help
Right.
in increasing the adoption of AI for even precision medicine. Like COVID has
Hmm.
shown us how powerful AI is in helping Moderna design its vaccine and helping Pfizer get its vaccines and even I think J&J get its vaccines. So
Right.
just the clear amount of influence that AI can have in this sphere to design that specific sequence, we have seen it in the past couple of years.
Right. Right.
And given the power and influence of it over the next couple of years and the rapid synthesis experiment screening loops, pretty
Hmm.
certain precision medicine is going to be there.
Right. Fantastic. Great research.
Thank you.
So coming out of this and asking you a very, very generic sort of human anatomy question, how do you think how much difficult it is then to understand human anatomy and gather huge amounts of data for AI to do relevant amount of data collection or research for human anatomy?
That's a very fair question, and it's a question that I've often wondered actually,
Mm,
given my research in developing models that tackle, let's say, cancer or cell
right.
penetrating peptides for Duchenne muscular dystrophy and targeting
Mm,
muscles and things like that. One of the biggest challenges, as you mentioned, is about the entire system, and human body
mm,
is absolutely complex. So
right.
getting one medicine that passes through the ADMET process, absorption, dissolution, metabolism, excretion, toxicity, passes through that entire barrage of things and
Mm,
becomes viable, does not have any side effects, it's a tough challenge
right.
because there are so many things about the human body that we still don't understand. And it
Mm,
just takes a very small, kink in the armor, just to break the system completely. It's going to be a
absolutely.
huge challenge. And
Right.
I would say I don't have a timeline in head, but maybe decades.
Mm,
And then we might be able to see that, okay, given a new drug and our understanding of the human anatomy and the system's biology at that point, we might be at a position where we can develop things that are safe enough to be given to the body directly, or just the
mm,
very limited amount of experimental trials. But we are not
mm,
there yet. There's still a long,
right.
long time to go.
Right. That's great. Thank you. Coming out of that and talking about how startups are doing in AI drug discovery, um, what do you think are the downsides of AI in drug discovery? Like higher costs, lack of professional skills in operation of platforms, and also the most important one, the funding. So, yeah.
So it's a very interesting question that you put forth here about and
Right.
then splitting it into three distinct and carefully thought out parts, I
Right.
must say.
Right.
Uh, Higher costs, definitely.
Sure.
Spitting out molecules using a model, not so much, but actually going and talking to companies or biotech companies, pharma companies, and testing that out, yes, it still holds true that to bring one drug molecule into the market is going to take $1 billion.
Right.
And
Right.
it somewhat actually transitions into the second question about the
Mm,
expertise. Now,
mm,
interestingly, AI and drug discovery startups do not exist in a silo. I think
Uh-huh.
pharma companies and even biotech companies have realized it like really fast that like, okay, AI is something that they can leverage and accelerate the drug discovery process. A couple of examples. Let's say Zebi AI was working on
Mhm.
DNA encoded libraries, and they were
Right.
working with Google research and then with Relay Therapeutics, and they were recently acquired by Relay. Relay
Hmm.
being like a good biotech firm, a decent sized
Right.
biotech firm. And similarly, post era, like focusing on small molecules, inked a seven-figure or eight-figure in dollars deal with
Mm.
Pfizer. And a lot of these deals are essentially based on like like giving out money in distinct milestones and also
Mm.
bringing in the expertise of medicinal chemists, of like experimental drug developers, clinicians in the main biotech firm. So, with the amount of expertise that the AI folks bring onto the table, combined with the experimental experience from the pharma
Mm.
companies, it's going in a great space and way. In terms of funding deep tech startups is always a challenge,
Right.
and it is increasing, I would say, given my
Mm.
basic read of, let's say, Fortune 500, like Fortune
Right.
500 companies or like just the magazine, even stats and all others. It's increasing. I don't know if I would say it's a bubble. I would not say that, honestly.
Mm.
But AI is definitely like pushing things farther and
Mm.
accelerating a whole bunch of processes.
Mm. Right. Um, yes, definitely. And I think with the current threat of COVID and
Mhm.
all even before that the SARS viruses being so prevalent and shaking up economies, I think it's also very important that like you said, the AI drug discovery can or should not work in their silos and being promoted or funded by these big pharma companies and um, yes, I think that's a great answer. What I was trying to understand from you as well was that how much important it is for these new startups or new companies to align with the vision of a big pharma company to be able to get investments from them, because otherwise you're sort of just a very good idea, but have no capital to sort of survive in drug discovery. So yeah, what is your opinion on that?
It's essentially like the classical conundrum of whether it's
Yeah,
tech first or customer first.
right.
And I think like even if it is an idea, like even if it's like
Mm,
extremely mathematical or you are just trying to develop a model, there are other avenues to prove it. And
right,
I am coming from more of an engineering background than a scientist background. So my thought
right.
process is always, where are you going to apply it? And what are the implications of it? And when it comes
Mm,
to drug discovery, is it actually helping us find a new antibiotic, like the works of
right.
like Regina Barzilai at MIT did that, finding like a
Mm,
new
mm,
antibiotic with
mm,
AI, or there was a Nature Biotech paper from Alana Spurugozic's work. And
right.
yeah, those accelerators, like that's something, like even if they're using the best of AI or developing new models, developing new techniques, as long as they are like making a huge impact in the drug discovery sphere, sure.
Mm,
Are they just implementing it for the science? Yeah, maybe it is going to be helpful, but keeping
right.
in mind some sort of an application is how I would personally think of it. But yeah,
Mm.
I'm an engineer and a very early career researcher to give a strong statement about it.
Right, right. Let me then challenge you on one more related topic. Is what is your opinion on the drug discovery for COVID? It is remarkable that
Mhm.
a usual discovery is, in terms of different trials that have been done and different phases in which it passes all the FDA approvals and all. It takes about 3 to 5 years, but this has been done in within a span of 1 year. What is your opinion on how was that done? Was it supported because of technology like, AI, and accelerated because of it?
Um, Honestly, like the testing and like just working it out is very much independent of AI.
Right.
AI is essentially the first step in getting to that sequence and let's say just screening several different mRNA sequences that could be injected, or even optimizing the solution or the nanoparticle carrier and putting it in. All of these trials, they were accelerated because there was a need for it. And
Right.
can we actually like do things on the war footing for several other diseases? Maybe, if there is intent, if there is enough capital. Like essentially, like Trump announced $1 billion funding. Not a supporter of Trump here, or not a supporter of any other political person here.
Right.
But at the same time, Trump announced $1 billion funding for a whole lot of companies to do like accelerated trials and development of drug candidates and do it. FDA supported it. That was a huge like push from NIH and I think Institute for Infectious Diseases, Anthony Fauci, and several other people. So it was as if the entire world was focused on addressing COVID.
And yet we lost like almost about 5 million lives on the whole planet. That's fascinating, that the war that has been waged and then the counter from us, from the scientific community is just amazing.
True. It's always sad to like lose lives. Even one life is important, and
Absolutely. Right. I mean, it is understandable and okay to sort of fathom that it has happened about 100 years ago when there was Spanish fever and about 5 million people died. But I mean, to think about it in 2021s, to be able to see that how we are still crippled and being so small, in terms of the limited knowledge about these viruses, and then to have a counter for it is just amazing. And so hats off to the drug discovery people and researchers who has managed to do that.
Absolutely.
Right. Great. Thank you. So my next question, Somesh, is what is the use of deep neural networks in drug discovery, like predictive modeling? And I read a lot about it. So what is your view on it?
So drug discovery in itself, let's roll back a bit and try to understand, like when we say we are trying to discover a drug, what exactly are we trying to do? So if we think about, let's say, a protein in the human body, a protein which is acting weird, and it is trying to go and bind to another protein suddenly where it should not be. Essentially an action that it should not be performing. And we want to block this protein A from binding to this protein B, which is actually supporting life and other actions. And like this can be thought of like in the example of like SARS-CoV-2 RBD finding like lungs, like cells in the lung and alveolar cells, and trying to bind there, or like other mechanisms and such pathways. And what we want to do is like somehow stop it, somehow like remove it from the system. And there are like several other things around like protein-protein interactions and different pathways that you try to inhibit, such that these two proteins can be independent, and this can continue to perform the metabolic activities and other things that it should, and this is just like stopped from doing anything or like affecting it. So what you're trying to do is try to take a small molecule or another peptide or any sort of molecule and bind here. And in this process of like drug discovery, what you are essentially trying to do is find a molecule or a set of molecules that bind to this protein. And there's a data set where you have input as the molecule and the protein. And there's a whole set of that. Assuming it's a protein-protein interactions that we are targeting, and we are finding a protein molecule binding affinity. And the output is essentially how well it binds.
Okay.
now there's a whole lot of chemistry that goes into it. Like it would be like, okay, does it bind as good as, let's say, a super glue? Or does it bind as
Right.
good as two magnets, which can be removed? Or does it bind just like two paper kept on top of each other, which is essentially just
Right.
like, it's a false positive, just like
Right.
sticking to it.
Yeah.
So what is that binding strength and how efficient it is? Once that binding affinity is there, it is about like, where does it bind? Like if this is the protein here and the other protein binds here, and like my molecule goes and binds on the other side, doesn't really matter.
True. Right.
So it's about those things which are very hard to comprehend and very hard to design using direct methods, or like using like normal ideas around chemistry. It's just the combinatorial complexity of the space, chemical space, that we are trying to address, which is like what kind. Yeah, go ahead, sir.
And so, does it mean that deep neural networks help determine that?
Deep neural networks help in understanding that functional landscape. So
Okay.
if you give a protein and a molecule, they can tell you like how well it binds there.
Right.
And you can iterate with different molecule. Once you have learned this function, training with a whole bunch of inputs with a protein and a molecule, or let's say we are focusing on one single protein, so we just train different molecules directly and get a binding affinity or a continuous value on the other side. So suddenly we can use 1,000 other molecules, or let's say 1,000,000 other molecules, and screen it super quick.
Sure.
And they would give us a list
Fantastic.
of binding affinity values ranked, like which are the top performers.
Right. And is that the most efficient process of finding this? How efficient it is binding from one protein to another? Or are there other methods as well, other than DNN, or are there other methods in AI?
Around machine learning, like deep neural networks essentially refers to an entire class of models. So they can be like convolutional neural networks, graph neural networks, and so on. And just given the size of the data, the type of the data, and the way you want to use it, I would say it's going to be efficient. However, comparing it to like the intuition of a medicinal chemist who has been working with that protein for years, and them developing a distinct molecule and optimizing over that, like there have been,
still cannot be compared.
It is hard to compare.
Right.
It just needs to click. It's the process of being creative in the mind of a human being versus like screening through millions of compounds using the model. So do you want to trust the computer that has gone through it and developed a model? Because there are honestly papers. One paper that I'm reminded of is by Lucy Caldwell in PNAS, or like Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences, which actually talks about how deep neural networks can be fooled and give you results which do not make sense. Like just the addition of a single carbon bond like shows that the binding affinity is still as high, but it is known as it's a decoy molecule that should not be working.
Right. So the interpretation of it is also very important.
I
mean, it can give you millions of good results, but whether it is interpreted it right, only a great chemist who has done, thousands of years of research can sort of say what is right for us or not. So that's fantastic.
And it also goes back to the question on startups that you talked about. And it's about getting folks in AI and experimental experience on the same table and then discuss this through. And that is perhaps the only way we can actually leverage the power of AI in screening through millions of examples. Because like maybe humans are great in optimizing in the local space, but when it comes to like finding a global minima, or like trying to think what is the craziest molecule that I cannot think of right now can fit into it. Like, no, I can't really think of, but like a model which is like,
but
Yeah,
Yes, but a machine
agnostic.
intelligence model can do
Exactly.
it.
Exactly.
Right, right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's why the combination is deadly. The experience of humans over hundreds of years of work, and then combine that with the lateral exponential sort of calculation that an AI model can do for
Mhm.
us. Fantastic. Great answer. Thank you. Um, yes. So, how does precision medicine work, and how are they discovered using AI? Can you talk about it, please?
Sure. This ties back to the question about the
Yeah.
vaccine design.
Mm.
And precision medicine is essentially about finding drugs or molecules or chemicals, essentially medicines, that work very particularly for a disease that you have. And there are factors around the environmental conditions within the body. And when I say environmental conditions, I mean like the pH around the tissues, the state of the tissues, the cells, um, different cases of genetics where one particular medicine might be better, or like one particular drug molecule might work better versus the other. For instance, let's take a very basic example of
Sure.
I would say an ibuprofen works better with me rather than a paracetamol or an acetaminophen.
Yes.
And
Right.
there are people who like even go further to say an ibuprofen from, let's say, CVS or Walgreens, like two drugstores here in US,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
one works better versus the other does not. And
Oh, okay.
like, yeah, means there are like processes, there are differences, like very slight differences on the efficacy, on the filler material used, and so on, which might have
Right.
a
Right.
like
Right.
a clear impact on it. So yeah,
Yes.
so precision
But it
medicine.
cannot be
Mhm.
right. But it cannot be like wholesome for everybody.
Exactly.
Only a CVS ibuprofen cannot be as effective for all the population, and that's probably why they create so many different versions of it.
Um, Sometimes it's like a marketing and a co-packing strategy, but there are
Aha.
people
Right. Right.
who try to believe that this particular brand and this particular medicine works better versus just the drug
True.
molecule or the compound.
True. Right.
So
Right.
yeah,
It's a little bit sad then because business sort of dictates what should go inside our bodies when we are not well. Uh,
there were like a couple of challenges around like
right,
vitamins, I believe, like in
right,
1990s. And but yeah,
right.
precision medicine, just to quickly wrap it up,
Sure,
is
absolutely.
like exponentially like increasing the complexity of that and doing a genetic screening and finding, let's say, for a simple thing as like a gastrointestinal infection or acidity, like what is
Right.
the best way to target that for you alone. And
Hmm.
that is how precision medicine is ideally going to work, let's say 10 years from now, when we would have a whole lot of 23andMe's and doing even medicine screenings and doing that for us.
Right. So fantastic thing because for me, how I understand it is customizing it
Mhm.
as per a group of people who have the same kind of perhaps immunity or same kind of reaction to a drug. Um, so fantastic thing precision medicine is. Yeah, right. So do you think that COVID and more variants after this will ever end? I know the answer to it, but I just wanted to know your opinion. And when do you see COVID world will be back and we can fly without restrictions, eat wherever we like, shop wherever we like, etc. What is your opinion of or prediction of when it is going to end?
Um, Means I don't want to sound too optimistic, to be very
Right,
honest.
right.
But
Mhm.
with Omicron, like
Yeah.
CDC in US recently announced that it's not
Hmm.
like causing too many symptoms in people, and even if there
Right.
are people with symptoms, it's very mild as compared to the Alpha or even the Delta variant.
True.
So reduced number of hospitalization cases, and the isolation periods are as low as 5 days from 14 days in the beginning.
Hmm.
So yeah, we are heading closer to a non-COVID world, or where it is no more a pandemic and more of an endemic.
Right.
Fingers
Right.
crossed, but I don't
Yeah.
want to jinx it by saying a number like
Right.
months or a year. No, no, no. I did that mistake already in the beginning of the pandemic when I expected us going back to offices after 6 months.
Right. That's good. But how do you think about, and it's a very political sort of question,
Uh-huh.
how do you think about people who are sort of supporting it versus people who are saying, I don't care. I don't care who dies because of me. I will not take the vaccine. So, I mean, I don't want to put you into the spot, but
Uh-huh.
try to answer it from a very, very non-political sort of way.
Uh, See, science is real, and
Right.
and the science shows that
Mm.
people are suffering less. Like every single graph on New York Times, which I essentially keep on following, shows
Mm.
that at some point New York Times was showing vaccinated versus unvaccinated, and like literally the graph used to be like this: number of hospitalization,
Right.
even in like Omicron. So
Right. Mm.
unvaccinated goes like super like high, and
Hi. Right.
I I I really don't want anybody to
Yes.
suffer, not because of a jab.
Correct.
It's sad that people have to suffer so much, get into hospitals. I wish they would understand and take the vaccine for their own
Mm.
safety, for
Mm.
the safety of their relatives and family. But yeah.
Right. I've seen so many reports on CNN and other places where they would show these examples of people who have declined to take a COVID vaccine, and soon after that, or perhaps after a few months, they died. And their relatives are sort of being very sorry about the fact that they even didn't push their own family person to sort of convince them to at least take a jab. How does it hurt to take something when we take so many bad things inside our body, in terms of, some people smoke, drink, and you know so yeah. Do you have to add anything to it?
Not exactly. I just wish that more people took this
Yeah.
seriously, and we'd be heading closer to the end of the pandemic.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, we shouldn't do left, right in it. I mean, it's just pure science. I mean,
Yeah.
5 million people, whoever were they,
Mm-hmm.
whether they were Democrats or Republicans, who cares? I mean, the most important thing is that they've died, and they've died because of something that has gone into their body. And you will not believe, but there are my own friends back
Mm-hmm.
home in India whom I discuss this with, and they're good, educated people, and they would actually deny this being a thing. They would say that it is just pneumonia, or they would say that this is a hoax. Can you just believe it? Like, it is unfathomable to know that people, even after 2 years of actually this is happening, so many people dying, countries going sinking economies because of all this, and people are still saying that it is nothing, it's a hoax, it's a propaganda, there are so many conspiracy theories. That's amazing.
People fall on a Gaussian distribution with that mentality. Then we
Right.
have
Right.
Sarah Palin,
Right.
the vice presidential candidate, who didn't take the vaccine shot.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yes. Oof. Anyways. But no, great answer. Let me bring you out of COVID and out of
Thank you.
AI for a minute,
Okay.
and ask you something very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
So I've heard this term called synthetic biology, and I
Mm-hmm.
keep asking this from all sort of my guests, whoever are talking about AI, is
Mm-hmm.
that using synthetic biology, is it possible that in the future we will be immortal? I've read somewhere that researchers have found ways to actually stop aging in a human cell, and this has been actually been done
Mm-hmm.
through research. So will that mean one day, with the cell transplant or other advanced methods, humans will actually become immortal?
Um, See, like immortality in terms of cells.
Hmm.
It's actually a two-part answer, I'd say.
Sure. Yes.
When we think about cancer cells, and one of the best cells that like people know in the cancer world is HeLa cell line. And HeLa cell line is widely used for cancer research and in general to test in molecular biology applications. And it was the first cell that didn't die even after like multiplying for days, years, and so on. So it's one of the most widely used cell lines these days. And the first instance of this cell line was, I think, in 1960s or 50s. That was when it was found from the cervical cancer of a lady whose initials are H and L. And yeah.
Right.
So immortal cells, where there is something that is clicked in the genetic system and it goes on multiplying without like senescence, that's the action, that's the word. And having like just going on and on dividing, fair. But when it goes into the body, each single cell like goes on at its own rate. Skin cells are being replaced very soon, neurons not so much. And we all know that like mutations and rapid division leads to cyst formations, tumors, and cancers, and we die if we suffer from cancer. So do we want that, like uncontrolled division? No. And when you mentioned the other thing about transplant, it just reminded me of the ship of Theseus philosophy, or the paradox. Right. Like if we transplant if we change every single cell in our body, are we going to be the same person or not? Or the same ship or not, if it's a plank?
Right. That's true.
So I would doubt that we are close to immortality, but delaying the aging process, I would say that's just possible by better habits, better diet. I should have my breakfast on a daily basis to reduce maybe my coffee consumption.
That's good. That's a good answer. But I mean, why I quoted this is that because I heard it actually from one of the great theoretical physicists, Dr. Michio Kaku, on one of the few appearances that he has done about several topics that he talked about on cosmology and others. And somebody actually asked him about this, and he actually laid down this idea and shared this idea about synthetic biology, and that sort of hit me. And I'm like, okay, I will talk about it whenever I get a chance from the AI researchers or people who are interested in healthcare, AI, and all.
I would say we are pretty far from like solving that problem of immortality. Let's tackle the low-hanging fruits first.
Right. Good. Great. I will not let you go without answering this again, a little bit of philosophical and more futuristic sort of question. How do you see the future of AI? Like, we know what is going on in AI right now. Maybe we are in a wave of narrow AI or weak AI, and there are chatbots who can think a little bit, but that's it. When we will achieve the human, when AI will achieve the human level intelligence, do you think that it will become a reality one day? Do you think that, not now, but maybe in the distant future, 100, 200 years, how do you see that future for us, or in the field of AI?
That's a great question, and there are a couple of threads in my mind that are tingling super fast.
Sure.
I speak out loud or like think out loud here.
Right.
Number one, any AI model that is trained is essentially at the end of the day multiple Gaussian distributions and like focusing on the mean of it. And it's just the sheer amount of data from humans that are provided to the model, and it has similar biases, similar thought processes as humans, and gets to being an average like thinking person. We have the Turing test to see whether it's going to surpass human human conversation or not, or fool another person that they are talking to a human or a bot. But like being humans and thinking creatively, coming up with another masterpiece, such as like a Mona Lisa or like another Monet's like lilies in the pond, something like that.
Yeah.
I doubt that AI would ever do that, rather than just trying to use generative art and like adapting the style of Van Gogh to something else.
Right.
In the distant future, is it going to be something like Dan Brown's book Origin, where the robot trains and like tries to kill its own master so that the master doesn't have to suffer? Is that a possibility? That's a question I am honestly scared of. If that happens,
Right.
it's going to be hard to imagine that that would be possible, that some machine would like to kill me without letting me enjoy all of my life.
Right.
But maybe it's possible a century from now, or even lesser than that. Like every time humans are bad at estimation.
Right.
Like there were conferences in 1950s where people wanted to like come together and solve AI for good. Never happened. We are still there. People have been talking about quantum computing since maybe 80s and 90s and getting the next quantum computer in the decade.
Right.
I think we are closer to that than actually having superhuman intelligence in AI systems.
True. Yeah, I mean, it's more like a tool right now than being a wholesome entity by itself. But I mean, so for example, if you talk to, say, if we time travel back and talk to somebody in 1910s or 20s, and if you tell them about the fact that today I have a thing in my pocket which is more powerful than anything that the world has created till 1910s or 20s, that person will not believe me. But it has actually happened. We, as Elon Musk says, we are sort of cyborgs, have a phone with us all the time, sharing data to Google and all these companies. And without this, we cannot live. So we are sort of cyborg already. So what is that probability, Somesh, that in the next 100 years from now, which we could not think right now, the machines will be able to take over, and not in a bad or good way, not worried about that right now, but will they? That's the question. Because with the kind of massive sort of growth that is going on in the field of artificial intelligence, like 20 years ago, it was just a subject in computer science. Now it is a reality in every organization and every field of tech.
Maybe if there's a new sci-fi writer right now, like Asimov in the 60s, so we might be there, or it might seem like, I'm not sure if you have watched the Netflix series Outlander, like somebody time travels to 1700s and 1800s, mid 1700s actually, from 1950s. So it's definitely possible that we are standing on the shoulder of giants and we are looking into the future. Tomorrow would definitely be easier and would make man more creative in some ways and lazier in a whole lot of other things.
That's true. Fantastic, Somesh. I have exhausted my questions and I had really good fun having this podcast and learned a lot from your experience. Before we end, do you have any parting thoughts for us?
Let's trust in AI and see where it goes. Let's be excited about it.
Yes, that's a great way to end it. Fantastic. Thank you, Somesh. You have a great day. And hopefully, if your time schedule matches with us, we will probably set up another round.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Vivek, for hosting me.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please support this podcast by liking, commenting, sharing it with your friends, and also subscribing to this channel. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.